So about 10 years ago, I worked at a laundromat alone and at night in a terrible part of town. To sum up the place, it was down the street from the projects. A lot of prostitutes would come in asking us to use my phone. Crackheads tried to sell me things like an open container of powdered iced tea, and there had been a serial killer whose house you could see from our parking lot. There are actually a few let's not meet again stories I have from there, but I'll post those at a later time. It was around 8 at night and dark on a Saturday. Saturdays were the worst, and as usual, I was working alone. The only customers in there were a Spanish couple and their young son, probably around 5 years old. A Rastafarian man walks in, tall and burly, with long gray black dreads, looking very pissed. My first reaction was to turn and say hello as he walked in the door, but I was taken back by the angry glare on his face. He was walking quickly, and it looked like he was about to fight someone. He began pacing around the laundromat, sweating, and just clearly on some type of shitty drug. He did that for a good 10 minutes, and then started saying things to the Spanish couple very loudly and out of breath. He knelt down and started talking to their son, and when he touched the kid's shoulder, I could see the parents pulling him back, obviously uncomfortable. As politely as I could, I said, "Hey sir, I'm really sorry, but my boss doesn't really want anyone in here if they aren't doing laundry." He stood up and glared at me and said, "What am I doing wrong? I'm doing nothing wrong. What am I doing wrong?" I repeated what I said quietly, and he started walking closer to me, and he was walking towards me. As he was walking towards me, he told me I was the reason why his people were brought to this country, that I manipulated them, and I'm the reason for all his pain. He was getting more and more worked up, and louder. He was so angry with me that spit was flying while he screamed, "One day, someone's gonna throw you in the dumpster. One day, you'll be in pieces all over the ground." He then stormed out and slammed the door. I called my boss to let him know what had happened, and tried to calm myself down. I grabbed a pen to keep on me, figuring I could try to jam it in his neck if he came back to attack me. The Spanish couple packed their clothes into their car, and the lady popped back in to tell me that the angry guy was pacing around in the parking lot. I looked out, and sure enough, he was. So I locked myself in the office and called my boss and the police. My boss came and escorted me out. The cops never even showed up. Fast forward to a few days later, I get a call from a detective who wants to ask me questions about the other night in the laundromat. 2 hours after I left that night, a woman got stabbed in our parking lot, and the description of the guy matched the big Rastafarian man. I never found out if she lived, or if they even caught the guy. I've never posted here, but thought I must since I'm a longtime lurker, and just had a definite creeper encounter. So, about 10 minutes ago, I was jogging through my neighborhood that I just moved to. I have not experienced anything weird, but we just moved here in fall. It's now springtime, and I guess the freaks are out. While jogging, up ahead of me, I see a car that pulled into the driveway, but not all the way. In our neighborhood, the driveways are long, and the sidewalks are set a bit away from the road, so they cut partway through yards and driveways. He is idling between the sidewalk and a road. As I'm getting closer to the car, the window rolls down and a man's eyes are on me. I could practically sense the slobber. I think, ill, but whatever, weirdo. I pass him up. As I'm heading towards the next road, I notice the same car pass me and slow way down. I don't have time for this crap. Luckily, I have headphones in and I am moving at a quick pace. No time for stopping. Sorry, dude. I pass him, hoping he just gives up. He drives past me, but super slow. I ignored him. He drove ahead, and now I'm starting to freak a little, thinking, what if this guy does this the whole time? I round a soft corner. Who's at the end of the street but this jerkwad? Stopped and waiting. Coincidentally, I am on the street with the house on it that has a backyard parallel with mine. I decided to cut through the backyard of this house and quickly get home. When I get home, I lock all the doors and am currently camped out at the window for any signs of the creeper. How lucky I am that I was where I was when this occurred. He could have followed me home, but I don't think he did because I don't see him, but I am still keeping watch. So, weirdo that followed me while jogging, let's not meet again. I just moved to a new city, had a few friends but still wanted to meet new people, and maybe a cute girl to date. I began using Tinder, which I had fun with in other cities. I matched with this gorgeous woman, way out of my league. Her profile was funny and interesting. We get to chatting and she's flirtatious and clever, and let it drop, she went to a top artsy school in France, so I'm intrigued. And also thinking she's out of my league. Why is she so interested? so I decided to Google her, which is not something I use to do before every day. Usually this will bring up a Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, etc. But when I clicked enter, her name came back with like 125k hits, news articles, videos, etc. Chronologically, the weirdness is thus. As a teenager, she was one of those women who started up correspondence with serial killers and had been engaged to 2 on death row before they were put to death. Now, she was engaged to her 6th grade English teacher. In her early 20s, he was famous for having falsely claimed to kill Jean John Bennett Ramsey. For this, she was on Good Morning America, saying he was going to use her to recruit 6th grade girls for a sex cult. Lastly, she became a high-end escort in the city, and had fairly popular blog about it. In general, not shaming the sex worker community, but this still was like sprinkles on the weirdness of this whole thing. After seeing these things, I was intrigued / creeped out by her, and found out she was the adopted daughter of a local billionaire. I decided this shit wasn't worth it, and deleted Tinder the day before our date. The next day, she messaged me on another dating app, asking me if I was still going to meet her for a drink. Let's not meet. A little bit of background. Growing up, I used to go with my mom to work, sometimes because she occasionally couldn't find a babysitter. I usually liked it. It was fun to walk around the store and help with little things here and there. Though, that being said, it was in a very bad part of town in a not so good city. So, I grew up around transvestites and homeless people. I think in hindsight it was probably a good thing. It let me see that they were just normal people in bad times. But that also gave me a bit of a sixth sense for people, since robberies have happened while I was in the store before. My mom always kept me cooped up in the little office in the back so I was never in danger. Now, one day my mom had to go into the store to pick up some check stubs, so I came with her. There was usually this homeless guy named Randy out front, and he never caused problems, and the whole store knew him, so they let him sit there to rest on rainy days like it was that particular day. We walked inside and my mom tells me to go to the register and wait for a little bit. So I started leaning things and playing with the buttons on a broken cash register right next to the exit. I should also say today was an especially dead day at the store, so there was only one check stand open at the other end of the line of cash register. As I'm pushing the buttons, I feel a tug on my shirt like someone is behind me. I assume it was my mom, and turn around only to see that it was a middle-aged couple that has deep wrinkles. The man smiles at me and says, "Hi, we're wondering if you want to buy a puppy. We have a few in our car and we can go show you one if you want to see." They're in our car. I immediately get really bad vibes from these people. My mom always told me about people saying things like that growing up, so I was already scared from that. I tried to get past them and say something about needing to tell my mom and ask if I can get a puppy. As I'm walking around them, the man grabs my arm tight and starts to drag me to the door. I immediately grab onto the edge of the register and hang on for dear life while calling for my mom. The man didn't look strong, but compared to the strength of a kid, it felt like fighting against a bear. Eventually, of course, he pried me off the thing, and I was ready to turn around to fight tooth and nail if need be. I was going to make sure we made noise, but just as I turned around, Randy was right there looking at us and asked if everything was okay. The woman this time came in and in a hurried tone said, "Ah, yes, he's our son. Come on, Greg." I scream, "My name is Carlson." Just then, my mom started coming down and says to the guy holding and rushed over, separating us, and said in a deeply serious tone, "Can I ask why you were holding my son?" The couple seemed to stop for a moment and think when the woman said, "Oh my god, I'm so sorry. I thought that was our son. We better go look for ours," and rushed past Randy out the door. I told my mom what happened when they left, and she thanked Randy profusely and held my hand every time we went to the store afterwards. So, to the creepy couple that tried to kidnap me, let's not meet. This happened to me a couple years ago. At the time, my fiance didn't believe me, but I'd been convinced for several weeks that someone was watching our house. Several Amazon packages stolen, cigarette butts by the front door when neither of us smoked, doormat had been moved. We had just moved to the area recently, and I was really uneasy about all this. My fiance teased me for watching too many murder mysteries and crime shows, but I eventually dropped the subject. One night, we were in bed together, nearly asleep. Our cat starts being really loud, so my fiance gets up to feed her and realizes we forgot to get cat food while we were out earlier. We both feel guilty about going to sleep knowing she's hungry. So he tells me not to worry, he'll just run over to the little 24-hour convenience store that's maybe 5 minutes down the street. He gets dressed press to leave, and I roll over to go back to sleep. I'm laying on my side in bed facing our window. As he leaves, I can see his shadow on the blinds as he walks down the sidewalk. Didn't know it yet, but he forgot to lock the door. Maybe a minute or two after he leaves, I see his shadow pass by the bedroom window again and hear footsteps coming back up the sidewalk. I figured since he was tired, he probably forgot his wallet and had to come back. This had happened before. I chuckled to myself about how forgetful he is. And the front door opens. My cat jumps off the bed to go and greet him. What happened next took place over the span of maybe 3 minutes, but felt like 3 days. It was dark and dead quiet in our house. Quiet enough I could hear my cat's little steps on the bedroom carpet suddenly stop. She then lets out the deepest, most terrifying growl I have ever heard a cat make. At this point, I hear a person take a few steps into our living room, shush her, and sneeze. It is definitely not my fiance. I'm a woman, alone, at night, naked in bed, scared out of my mind, and I have no idea what to do. This guy clearly knows my fiance is out. Does he know I'm home alone? Is he here to kidnap or hurt me? My phone had died earlier, of course, so it's off and plugged into the charger. I know once it turns on, AT&T's loud as fuck little jingle is going to betray me. So for right now, I'm on my own. Thankfully, we keep a shotgun by our bed. I slip out of bed, grab my gun, and crawl as quietly as I can towards the bedroom door, which is about 2/3 of the way closed. I can hear the creep rummaging through our stuff in the living room, and he sneezes again. This dick. I peek through the gap in the door, and the outside light is just barely bright enough to illuminate a man hunched over our insurance center, his back to me. I silently open the door the rest of the way and stand up, still 100% naked and 100% determined to keep myself and my cat safe. I muster all my stupidity and courage and cock the shotgun, and in the deepest booming voice my body will allow me to make, I bellow out, "What the fuck do you think you're doing?" I've never seen a human jump so hard or run so fast. I scared the creep so badly he about launched himself into orbit. I got one good look at his back as he ran outside into the darkness, and then he was gone. I slammed the door shut behind him and yanked my terrified cat out from under the couch by the neck. We booked it back to the bedroom with my gun. I held her so close to my chest and just started sobbing while I struggled to turn my phone on and dial 911. My fiance got home with a can of cat food moments later and immediately noticed the PS4 on the ground and our other electronics moved around. He found me in the bedroom flipping out, and I barely got any words out to explain what had happened before the cops showed up. They were super nice, but unfortunately there wasn't much they can do. They didn't have a lot to go on as I hadn't seen the man's face at all and couldn't really give them a solid description. Fortunately, none of our stuff actually ended up being taken, and more importantly, my cat and I were both okay. However, we were both positive the creep lived in our area, as a few weeks later, someone we knew up the street was robbed in the exact same way. He left the door unlocked for a moment to run to the store, came back and all of his electronics had been stolen. I'm not sure if they ever caught the creeper. We noped out of that neighborhood pretty quick. Lock your doors, people. So yeah, creepy thief watching my house. Let's never meet again. This happened a while back when I was 12 or 13. It was summer, really hot outside, and everyone was wearing dresses, shorts, tank tops, sandals, that sort of thing. Where I'm from, it's normal for kids to take public transport to and from school, as opposed to being driven, or taking the school bus, which is not a thing here. As it was hot, I wore a tank top and a wrap skirt that I had borrowed from my mom. I was a teen, but still young enough where I think your parents are cool, not weird. And I really liked this one of my mom's. It was green and it was long. Definitely nothing seductive about it. And if you can picture the words 12 to 13 years old and seductive in one sentence without a cringe, you're a creep. I was heading back from school, which always ended at 3 p.m. and I just got off the bus. With about 5 to 10 minutes of walking home in the residential area left to go, I couldn't have been much later than say 3:30. So broad daylight and people milling around, getting home from work, going to do their groceries, that sort of thing. As I'm about to cross the road from the bus stop and go home, a car stops for me. It's a very typical make for this part of the world. A nondescript kind of beige color. Neither too new nor too old. There's a dude driving the car and no one else in it. He greets me with a familiar, "Hi, how are you?" I have been brought up to be polite, so I answer that I'm okay, thank you. He's still in the car, behind the driving wheel, engine running. "You look really nice today." "Thank you," I say. "You don't remember me, do you? I'm a friend of your dad's from work." I'm just driving down to have some coffee at your place. Hop in, I'll give you a ride home. Now, I've been raised well and don't want to be rude, but I've also been raised to apply critical thinking and to listen to my instincts. Thank you for the offer, but I'm fine. I can walk. The guy is sort of nondescript too, maybe in his late 30s, early 40s, about my dad's age. Brown hair, normal clothes. He absolutely could be my dad's friend. My dad is quite social, and there are quite a couple of his colleagues from the broadcast that have met me and know me and my siblings ever since I was small. I've always had a really bad memory for faces, and I think to myself, maybe I do know him, but the red flag at the back of my mind was waving frantically, and I'd rather be rude than dead. Oh, but it's no hassle for me. I'm going your way anyway. Just hop in, and we'll be there in a flash. In my 12/13-year-old brain, two parts of me are hassling. I don't want to be impolite and maybe cause difficulties for my dad. After all, by car, it's maybe just a minute or two, and that's not time enough to get too awkward. I don't want to insult someone I do know. Just can't remember by not recognizing him. On the other hand, I can't place his face. I can't remember his name. He does not look familiar, and I thought about stranger danger, and a hefty amount of my own aloofness and self-preservation to go with it. Even at 12/13, when I was listening to my gut, I often felt rude after, but that was the extent of my trauma. And when I talked myself out of it with reason, I often discovered later that my senses are quite astute at picking up things that I am unable to process until later, and are often very correct. So I muster my courage, knowing I'll probably be embarrassed later because I don't know my dad's good friend. I say, "I'm so sorry, sir. I don't mean to be rude, but I don't recognize you. Once I get home, if you're having coffee with my dad, I will apologize, but I would feel better just walking home." Dude says nothing. His expression goes cold. Have I really offended him? And then he quickly rolls up his window and drives off, totally not in the direction of where my dad lives. That alerted my red flag to military parade and turkey levels of activity, but also flooded me with relief that I decided not to be polite. It was only once, when he was out of the view, I thought that I should have tried to read and remember his license plate. I decided to take a very around route to get home, just in case. While walking, I talked myself into believing that I'm just paranoid and that it was completely unnecessary. I get home, and of course, there is no visitor there. I was a distracted kid and very well able to gaslight myself on my own. So by the time I get there, I decided the whole exchange was unimportant, and almost forgot about it in a couple of weeks. It's not until years later that it suddenly dawned on me that I absolutely should have told my parents, and probably reported it. That was not normal behavior, and it was potentially dangerous. I got out alright, because I've always been a kid with healthy amount of self-preservation, but God knows, maybe even tried again with a more naive kid. I tried to placate myself that maybe I was his first ever attempt, and my paranoia persuaded him that it was a very much bigger risk of being flagged, trying to pick up kids, and gave up on that. Not likely, but possibly. God knows what would have happened to me if I got in the car. He was not someone I know, but at the same time, he was not trying to hide his face at all, which might mean all sorts of things, from really just being socially retarded to trying to be helpful, all the way to you won't be in a position to tell anyone ever again anyway, so who cares? The scariest thing of all this is that it isn't something that happens in the dark, in secluded nasty places. It was full daylight, and people were around though. No one in direct hearing range. It wouldn't have looked weird to anyone at all, as long as the exchange didn't take too long, and as long as there was no violence. I grew up in Ohio, but would spend my summer breaks visiting my dad, who lived in England. This gave me the rare and fortunate opportunity to see a lot of Europe during my teenage years. In the summer of 2009, I took a trip with my father and stepmother, with one of the stops being Graz, Australia. After a day of sightseeing, we checked into our hotel, which was just outside the city of Graz, Graz sits at the foot of the Alps, and our hotel was elevated, which gave us a nice view of the city at night, depending on your vantage point. This also made it somewhat secluded on a darker black road. The hotel was also unique in the parts of it were broken into a separate cabin like B&Bs. My father and stepmother stayed down the street in one of these cabins, while I had my own room in the main building, which was more like your standard pub. While a lot of these details may seem minutiae, its layout and location will come up again later. It's also important to note that my room sat over the hotel's restaurant, so the roof extended out from under my window. If I wanted to, I would have been able able to step out and walk across it. We were only staying there one night before moving on in our trip. It was warm being on the second floor, so I had one of my 2 windows cracked to let in the breeze. The only English speaking channels were CNN and MTV, so I had just laid there with the lights off, the only glow coming from the TV. As I began to doze, I heard something. It sounded like gravel shifting coming from outside. Already, being a paranoid person, I turned the TV off, making my room completely black. I slowly moved towards the window, telling myself I heard a small animal or something. I crouched behind the translucent curtains and peered out. Out on the roof, maybe 20 or 30 feet away, I saw a man. He was standing upright, facing out towards the city and back patio of the hotel. My nerves settled as I figured it's someone who had the same idea I did. He'd probably climbed out of one of the rooms next to mine to get a view of the city. No big deal. I slowly started to step away from the window when I heard the sound again. It again sounded like gravel shifting, but I couldn't tell. It wasn't coming from the man standing at a distance. It was coming right by my window. I was lucky to have the curtains I did, as they allowed me to see out, but with my lights off, I was shielded from sight. I came back to the window, looked down to my right. Crouching down was a man. He had a hood up and what looked like some kind of blank white mask on. I understand now that maybe this was my mind exaggerating the memory, but that white plain face is burned into my brain. Think something like the movie Hush or The Court of Owls if you're a Batman fan. Either way, it was clear he was trying to peer into my room, but couldn't see me because I was blocked by the curtains. I stood there staring at him for a few seconds before slowly leaning in and banging my hand on the window. He took off, as did the man at the ledge. It's clear now that the other guy was a lookout. After shutting and locking the window, I went down to the lobby and found the manager of the hotel. He barely spoke any English, so explaining what had happened was hard. But once he finally understood what I was saying, he dismissed it, repeating impossible multiple times. I thought about going to the street to my parents' cabin, but the idea of running down a dark road after what had happened did not sound appealing. The rest of the night, I slept with a Heineken bottle from the mini fridge clutched in my hand. The next morning, I looked over the building and roof, trying to understand their escape plan. I still have no idea, as the only way off was to leap from the roof to the ground, but doing so would have been disruptive and maybe even injure them. They were in opposite directions too, which is confusing. I'm under the impression that they were staying in another room and had simply darted back in the window, but that still doesn't explain where the second guy went. As we were leaving the hotel, a family friend who lived in Graz came to meet us for breakfast. After explaining what had happened, he nonchalantly affirmed that they had intended to rob me, while I tell myself that they were probably hoping to simply steal from a tourist while he slept. Another voice wonders how bad it actually could have gone. So Mr. Australian burglar without a face, let's not meet again. Hey guys, what's going on? It's your boy Jensen here. So I hope you enjoyed my narration of some of these stories that I found on the subreddit Let's Not Meet. It's a very fun Reddit to go around and just read. I hope you guys enjoyed some of these. If you think some of these might be a little fake, comment down below which one. I'm curious to see what you guys think. And hopefully you guys like this new content I'm making. I'm having really fun making it. Alright, that's about it. Oh yeah, don't forget to smash that motherfucking like and subscribe button. Alright, bye.